Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time for some more Storycraft. And today we are going to talk about money. Actually, we're going to talk about fake money. That is money that's imaginary, part of an imaginary world in a novel or a game. Monetary systems as part of world building. So hopefully this video will be useful for those of you who are game designers or who are novelists and want to have the economic parts of your world actually exist, or maybe have a unique twist to them or something about them which is a little bit different and still believable. Before I get into the nitty-gritty, let me say that this is one of the things that I probably tend to think too much about when it comes to world building, is how financial transactions work. Part of that is because my father was an economist. We talked about a lot of these things from an early age. It's something I think about a lot, and it's something he would point out the problems with a lot of books and movies, as I was growing up or as we were talking about them, how certain money systems probably wouldn't work. My dad was also a gunsmith, so it was a lot of stuff like these guns wouldn't work either. But I'm going to focus just on, for the most part here, the money element today. So before I get really into the nitty-gritty, let me also say it is a-okay to go with something very simple. Credits. Galactic credits for your sci-fi universe, or credits for your Federation, and then there's another currency for the enemy or something. Galactic credits work fine. It's going to be money. People will immediately understand it's money, and they'll also immediately understand more or less the value of the credit relative to what people are trying to get out of it. So just going with something simple like galactic credits, or if you're doing like medieval fantasy, gold and silver coins. That stuff is really easy to understand. People kind of innately understand the value of a denarius, right? Like a $20 silver coin. And so if you're using that as your monetary system, people will very easily figure out the value of things. And they're already going to believe that that's possible to do because we did it throughout history. We exchanged gold and silver, precious metals, as a unit of exchange in economic terms. So you can just go with that and not have to think any deeper. If you want to think a little bit deeper, let me explain some things that I think make good money for your imaginary world or your imaginary universe. And these are the things which really make good money in our universe as well. So the first one is that it's a common unit of account. That means not just me, but pretty much everyone else around me in the economy thinks of the value of things in terms of the unit of money, whatever it happens to be. So if a shovel is worth 3 denarii, it should be worth 3 denarii to me and my neighbor. We both think it's worth 3 denarii. When we go somewhere near us and we want to buy a shovel, we are expecting to pay 3 denarii for the shovel. We think of things in terms of whatever the unit of currency happens to be, and that's really, really important. You don't want people to be thinking of 17 different units of currency, and so for that part, because it's a common unit of account, you really can't have lots of different currencies. Consumers don't want many different standards. They want one or few standards. So bimetallism, gold and silver, that's 2 standards. If you're going with single metallism, gold, some sort of gold system, that's a single standard. What you don't want is gold, silver, copper, palladium, platinum, uranium, thorium. You don't want to go down the list of, there's 20 different kinds of coins you have to exchange. It's kind of like the problem with cryptocurrencies, is like there's so many, which one is really the currency we want to use? Reality is people almost never use them as currency. They try to collect them and trade them in different ways. They're not really used as a common unit of account. Nobody's really thinking of things in terms of BTC or something like that. So the next one is it has to be store value. And what that means is that if you collect 3 denarii today for work, then you're going to get the value of 3 denarii next week or even next year out of the money that you've saved. And then it's an efficient store value, meaning some things will go bad. Like if you buy food, if you buy bread with your denarii, bread goes bad. You need to eat it. But the denarii won't go bad. They'll stick around for a while. So your denarius should pretty much be worth the same. Over time, maybe it loses value to inflation, but with a reasonable amount of time, it's a store value. If it's capable of being hyperinflated, if you're deciding on something that can be manufactured or replicated very easily, then that destroys the value of the money, and then it's no longer a store value. People aren't going to want to use it as money. The next one is it needs to be divisible to a useful point. That means that you have to have a small enough unit that you can do small transactions. Can you buy a loaf of bread? Is if you only have ounces of gold floating around, this is why gold pieces, they're usually not a great idea for a unit of currencies, that you can't buy a loaf of bread with one piece of gold, even if it's a very small piece of gold, because gold is too valuable. So you have to have some other division. Thus we end up with bimetallism, where you have a small denarius of silver that you can use to buy some bread, or a couple loaves of bread, or maybe even pieces. Like you may use bits. You may cut the denarii up, or the dollar up into 8 pieces of equal weight, so you can get a really small division. That's one of the things with metallism, is you can make pretty small divisions. But, it has to be divisible to a point. It doesn't have to be infinitely divisible, but you need to be able to, say, buy bread or rice with at least one unit of your currency. The next one is it needs to be easily transported. So coins are great because coins fit in your pocket. You can have a big stack of coins. Even though gold is very heavy, it's very dense. A bag full of gold isn't that heavy, and it doesn't take up a lot of space. So you can buy a lot with a little chest of gold, or a little bag of gold. You can buy a ton of goods and services with that, which means it's pretty easily transportable. Same thing with silver, same thing with copper. They fit in your pocket, which is why metallism is so good. Our modern economy, you have bills. Bills are really easily transportable. You can put paper money in your wallet or your pocket. It doesn't weigh very much. Really easy to move around. If you're going with galactic credits could be easily transported in the sense that you have a unique debit card, or you have a unique something that connects to your bank account, right? So you can transport your money with a credit card. That's an easy transport of money. So in a future system, maybe you have an implant on your hand that keeps track of all your cryptocurrency, and you just scan that, and that's how you can transport your cryptocurrency around. It's easily transported. Things that are not easily transported would be like if you're deciding, our monetary system is going to be sheep. It's like you can't move sheep around that easily. It's not money. The next one, and this is where a lot of imaginary systems fail, is fungibility, or what we might call ergodicity of the currency, which basically means two coins are the same. They're the same value. Any coin can be exchanged with any other coin. The units are all the same. 3 denarii is the same as 3 denarii. It's always the same. 1 denarius is always 1 denarius. Now, there's limits to that, right? So with coins, you might have 2 coins from 2 different years, or have quarters with 2 different back faces on them, and these are not exactly the same, right? But they're close enough that they're still fungible. We recognize this is still a quarter, a U.S. minted quarter, and therefore has the value of a U.S. minted quarter. Likewise, silver coins stamped with various different monarchs, as long as they're the same weight, quarter of an ounce or something for your denarius, or a tenth of an ounce for your denarius, then it's going to be a functional coin, and it's going to be fungible. The next one is durable. Coins are, again, great because you can knock them together, and over time the metal wears down a little bit, but it takes a lot. Same thing with paper money is not that durable compared to coins, but it's actually fairly durable considering how we treat the money. We put it in a special place, but you wouldn't have eggshells as a currency, and glass beads are not a very good currency either because they break very easily. So it has to be durable enough that you can carry it around in your pocket and it's not going to break through normal use. So it has to be fairly durable. If you're going with galactic credits, durability is not an issue. The only durability issue is like your credit card. Is your credit card durable enough to use over and over again, or your maybe you have a microchip storing your Bitcoin or something? That has to be durable enough that it's just not going to break, and you won't have any use for it. The last one is that the currency needs to have limited alternative use. So you can have some alternative use for a currency, meaning, for instance, gold. You can melt gold down and make things out of gold. But most of the things you make out of gold are jewelry, which is really just to display that you're wealthy enough to have gold. Same thing with silver. There's some industrial uses for gold and silver, but they're limited. They're not infinite. If you have infinite or extreme alternative use for your currency, it's probably going to be bad. It's probably not going to be a very good currency at all. Same like if we use tobacco as an example. At one point, you could pay your taxes in tobacco in various states in the South, here in the United States. So what did people pay their taxes in? Did they pay it in US dollars, which are kind of hard to acquire, or tobacco? Well, they would pay it in tobacco, and they would sort their tobacco, so they'd pay their taxes in the worst tobacco. The tobacco is not durable. It rots after a while. It turns to dust. It has extensive alternative use, meaning you can smoke the tobacco, and there goes the money. So tobacco is not good money, and so cheap money will drive out dear money, and that is something that you have to be aware of whenever you're creating something. That usually happens due to, say, lack of fungibility. Not all tobacco leaves are the same. Some tobacco leaves are a little bit better, and so you save the tobacco leaves that are better to sell on the private market, pay your taxes in your bad tobacco. So limited alternative use is important. So that's why something like Bitcoin could make a very good currency, because there's nothing else you do with Bitcoin. You don't melt Bitcoin down and turn it into bullets or something like that. So it makes sense. You want to have something that's just not going to be used for a whole lot of other things in your economy. So let's get into some examples. Let's start with a really popular fantasy example. That is the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Now in this one, he uses little gems encased in glass beads as a form of currency. I think this is so creative. It was such an interesting take on the idea of currency, but it does not make good money. And it doesn't make good money if you're keeping track of that list, that it's got to be a common unit of value, or a common unit of account, store of value, it's got to be divisible to a point, it's got to be easily transported, fungible, durable, limited alternative use. It actually doesn't really hit any of those very well. So first of all, it's not fungible. You have a bunch of diamond chips, let's say, which is their smallest unit of currency. Well, diamonds are unique. Diamonds are not fungible at all. And if you've ever shopped for an engagement ring, gents, like you want to marry this girl, jewelry salesman will let you know that right away, that one size of diamond can have many different values depending on the quality of the diamond. The diamond could be yellow and therefore worth less. The diamond could be kind of brown colored and therefore worth a lot less, or it could be very clear and therefore worth more. It could have some inclusions which make it worth less, or it could have no inclusions which makes it worth more. It's like I have a D grade diamond which is like colorless, but it has an inclusion in it. It's a unique diamond, and every inclusion in the diamond is unique. Some diamonds may have extreme inclusions. Others may have very faintly detectable inclusions. Some diamonds fluoresce under black light. How cool is that? My wife's wedding ring's diamond, that one fluoresces under black light. Kind of cool to see how that works. So they're all different. They're not fungible at all, which means if you're making a currency out of little pieces of diamonds, well, some are going to look like they're worth more than others. Oh, here's a diamond chip that's pretty big. I bet you we could break it open, split it into 2 diamonds, and make 2 more out of it. Just double our value. And you could do that with every one. That's a ruby. We could, this ruby happens to be a little bit bigger. I bet we could recut these and make 2. Or maybe the rubies have alternative value. They have alternative use, which they have in the Stormlight Archive. They could storm Stormlight, or they're used to like power these magic glove things. So they end up having alternative use, which is going to make them not the best choice of currency. They're also not durable if they're encased in some kind of glass that's just going to break, right? Like glass marbles are not good currency because you carry them around your pocket, they break. They're not easily transported because if you're down on the bottom rungs and you're like, I got 200 diamond chips and they're barely worth anything, but I have to take a wheelbarrow full of diamond chips over to the guy to buy food. That's what I have to do. That's not very easily transportable. It takes up too much space to have a bag of marbles where each one's worth a penny, whereas 100 pennies, you could still hold 100 pennies in your hand pretty easily, So they're really not that good there. And then they're divisible enough to a point, and they do have different values. So like rubies are worth more than diamonds, et cetera, et cetera. I don't remember how it all breaks down, but there's a problem with that too, which is that you end up having common unit of account be a problem, which is, are we thinking of this in terms of rubies, diamonds, emeralds? Which gem are we thinking this of? Well, there's 4 different gems that we're all thinking a value of. It's not a common unit of account. We're not thinking of things in an appropriate value at that point. Not only that, but the value of each one goes up and down depending on the concentration, just like with gold and silver. So if you're trying to peg the value of gold and silver together, you're going to end up with a lot of economic issues, which the United States actually had those issues in the 19th century, trying to peg the prices of gold and silver to the dollar, which is that as silver went down in price, you really wanted to do something else with your silver so you could get more dollars gold. And then if gold went down in price, or silver went up in price, you started wanting to melt down your silver dollars and turn them into bullion, which you would sell. So bimetallism is fine if they free float, but it becomes a problem when you try to peg them. And in this case, the value is trying to be pegged one to the other. This was also a problem moving on. So that's Stormlight Archive. I mentioned on the live stream when someone asked a similar question about this, Harry Potter, like the J.K. Rowling's idea. Now she uses metal, which is good, and she uses 3 kinds of metal: bronze, which is copper, so bronze, silver, gold, and the value is not like 10 to 10 to 10. It's like 15 to, it's there, but it's pegged. And that's a problem because you might make more gold galleons. More gold galleons are available. Well, there's a lot more gold galleons. We're going to want to do some exchange stuff to kind of muck with it. So they're fixed by fiat, which is okay if there's no alternative use for any of the gold. But really there is, so you end up with the problem where if you're trying to peg the value of one form of metal to another form of metal, you're going to have problems because the supply of each form of metal is going to go up and down. We discover a new silver mine. Suddenly the value of silver plummets, and people want to take their bullion and have it minted into dollars because they get more value out of the dollar. Or they take their silver sickles and get more value out of the sickles. They want to have those minted into actual money, or we want to sell them to the mint, whatever you want to do there. So that's the problem with that. And the other problem with Harry Potter, as I mentioned on the live stream, is that she set up a bank that was basically a full reserve storage bank that would cost a lot of money to store your money there because it's like guarded by dragons and crazy things like that, rather than making the bank like an actual bank that actually you deposit your money, they would hold some in reserve because you're not going to take out all your money at once, and then they would loan out the money, which is the way normal banks have operated for a long time. We call that partial reserve banking, and in which case you'd end up with a mixed standard. Anyway, you wouldn't have a pure gold standard unless there was no fractional reserve banking of any kind. So you can keep that in mind too. So if you want to create an economy where there's no banking, then obviously storing gold that's you preserving your money. You're not lending money out and then keeping these kind of partial tabs where people start exchanging deposits. Once you start getting banking involved where people are exchanging deposits, you have a mixed standard, and you also have the amplification of the supply of money, which basically is because of deposits between banks. When you deposit 100, say you deposit 100 denarii, they loan out 90 of it and they keep 10 in reserve because everybody's going to do that, and then they have enough for anybody to come in and get their denarii out. And then that 90 that they loaned out ends up getting put back into the bank or another bank, which then loans out 81 of it on down the line until you end up making almost 1,000 denarii out of that original 100 denarii deposit or $100 deposit, whatever you want to look at. So knowing how the banking system works where you're going to have trading deposits is also valuable if you're going to have that. Okay, so partial reserve banking is a thing that really is how economies are built nowadays, and knowing how that works will help you if you want to design a system that's like that. If you want to totally ignore it, how are people going to have debts or pay debts? How are people going to exchange debts? How are contracts going to be enforced? Those are all questions that you have to ask yourself and then be able to answer in order to make the money make sense. Let's look at another example, which is Star Trek. So Star Trek had this idea of no money in the future. No money. We're in a post-scarcity economy, post-scarcity world. What they mean by post-scarcity is that basically they have replicators that could make gold, right? So gold isn't scarce. They can make as much gold as they want or they need. They have basically infinite energy from their ability to, mix matter and antimatter or whatever their energy sources are. So really, people don't need money. That was their idea. What if people didn't need money? Problem is there's really no such thing as post-scarcity. There's no such thing as no scarcity. At the very least, you have human scarcity. That means the people who design the machines and work on the machines, they have limited time to do so, and they would rather spend their time, rather than working on machines, they'd rather spend it fishing or something, right? Only if you had an economy that was completely run by robots, and by that I mean the robots also design and build the other robots, and they're all benevolent towards mankind. Only with an economy like that would you have, quote, post-scarcity. So, but they stuck with it for a long time. People didn't have money. They didn't know how to do money. Then in Star Trek 4, they go back in time and they're like, we need some of this money. We need some money. Like, people would just better themselves because was their, grand humanist idea. Well, once you get out into the wider galaxy, you realize that other races maybe don't think that way, and you really would like to tell some stories that involve more money and involve greed and those sorts of human human emotions. So by the time you get to Deep Space Nine, you have conjured up a form of currency called gold-pressed latinum. And latinum being some sort of invented material that can't be replicated. Replicators can't make more of it, so it's a limited resource. And as soon as you can make it limited, you're going to hit all of those things. It has limited alternative use. Maybe it's durable. All latinum is the same as all other latinum. It's fungible. You can carry it around physically, so you can move it around. You can divide it up into little pieces. It's valuable. It's a store of value because there's a limited amount of latinum. We can't make infinite latinum with our replicators, and people are, for whatever reason, deciding that it's something worth pursuing. It's worth something worth having as money. And I remember there's an episode where Quark finally is going to get his hands on this gold pressed latinum, these stacks of bullion, and he crushes in his hands because all the latinum has been taken out of the gold which encases it. It's like a liquid, and he's like, "There's nothing here but worthless gold." Which was great. So even they had to come up with a currency that would meet these things so they could tell stories that involve economies and economic transactions and things as simple as greed. It's a lot harder to tell humanizing stories if you're like, we're going to invent a future where everybody's benevolent and just trying to better themselves, I guess, out of boredom and doesn't need money. So even they had to come up with a unit of currency that would work. Let me talk about post-apocalyptic settings, because these are ones that people really love to think about. Like, what would be the currency after the apocalypse? Would the US dollar still be used as currency? Well, the problem with it is it's not very durable in a post-apocalyptic setting. It could be burned up. Maybe it's just sitting in the bank. Like, you go get it out of the bank, and now you have 100,000 of them, which means figuring out the store value is not going to work, especially if the population's been depleted. We have stacks and stacks and stacks of paper money. It's worthless, right? There's too many dollars to go around per person. So what you need instead is some sort of replacement to that. Again, I still think metallism would be the best choice in a post-apocalyptic setting, simply because we've always recognized that silver is worth money and gold is worth money. People will regress back to metallism. You can't fake what gold is. Like, gold is gold. You can test that it's gold. You can feel that it's gold. There's lots of cowboy stories about people trying to put gold on the outside of lead to fool people. But you get the idea. Metallism would probably go back. But let's think of some alternatives. Now, the one that is most common and is the worst is ammunition. This is something that I see so many people trying to do. Oh, after everything collapses, and it's going to be like Mad Max world, ammunition is what they're going to use as money. No, ammunition is terrible money, and let me explain. Usually I get this from people who don't really know a lot about guns, which is okay. You don't have to know a lot about guns, but I'm going to teach you a little bit right now. So, does ammunition meet those qualities of good money, or would it quickly devolve into something that really couldn't be money? So first of all, is it a common unit of account? Oh, I could think of things in terms of bullets. Not really, and it really has to do with fungibility. Ammunition is not fungible. You're like, oh, I'm going to go buy a bushel of wheat. How much is the bushel of wheat? Well, it's 4 bullets. And you're like, great, here's 4 bullets. And you pull out, boom, here's 4 bullets. And they're like, well, those are really little bullets. I wanted 4 big bullets. It's like, well, these are 22 Magnum. It's like, these are still bullets. They'll still fire. I don't have a 22 Magnum rifle. I can't use them. What I want is 303. I want 4 of those. Well, I don't have 4 of those. I have 1 of those. Okay. It's not fungible. These two things are not the same. Not only are they not the same, like you only use this in a British 303. You can only use this in a 22 mag. And if you don't have that available, then it doesn't have an alternative use of any kind. You're like, well, I can't use it in my gun. Why would I want it? I have to trust that this will somehow be just as valuable to somebody else that I exchange it with. The whole point of ammunition being valuable is that you can shoot other people with it, or you can shoot animals with it. So no, this wouldn't be good because it's not fungible. Not only that, but like, okay, well, let's say someone's 357 Magnum is going to be our currency. Great. These two are not the same. Okay? These two are not the same at all, right? This one's a wad cutter. This one's a hollow point, right? They're loaded with different amounts of powder. They're in different colored. This one's in a nickel casing. This one's in a brass casing. They're not the same. Even though they're both 357, you can shoot them out of the same gun. They're not the same. One is better than the other. One's more desirable than the other. You're going to end up having cheap money drive out dear money once again. So ammunition is not a good one. It's also is not going to stick around. You're going to be shooting it out of your gun, which means you're constantly depleting the store of the total quantity of money is going down and down and down, which eventually makes the eventually makes the ammunition far too valuable to use as currency because you can't divide it small enough for useful transactions. Maybe at the outset, there's enough bullets floating around that you could exchange, you could barter some bullets for bread, but after a while, it's not going to work. So it could work as a barter, an item for barter. Hey, I have some 303. Do you use 303? I do use 303. Maybe we can make a trade. All right. So maybe you could do barter with it, but you can't use it as currency because of all those reasons. And eventually it just wouldn't be divisible to a usable point. It's also not that easily transported. If you're like, hey, it's it's four bullets for a bushel of wheat. It's like, I'd like to buy the entire field with this 500 rounds. Okay. And of 22. Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, maybe we decide that this isn't going to be worth as much, but this is heavy. Ammunition weighs a lot too, so it's not that easily transported because it just weighs a lot as well. So there you go. Ammunition is not a very good one. Now I'm going to give you one that I actually think is surprisingly good, and that is the noble bottle cap. Yes, the noble bottle cap. So the noble bottle cap is the unit of exchange in Fallout, and this actually makes a pretty good money for a post-apocalyptic setting. And the reason is it has limited alternative use. They're not using bottle caps for anything. Okay. It's a store of value because they can't make more of them. They lost the technology to make more bottle caps. The only way you get more in the economy is if you go out and scavenge where nobody's been and find more bottle caps off of old Nuka-Cola bottles. It's fungible. Bottle caps are all the same size. They all look the same. They're easily identifiable as a bottle cap. Now, just like coins, you can have different things printed on the bottle cap, but you're not going to have, you might have a collector who collects different bottle caps the way a collector collects coins. But ultimately, that doesn't affect the core fungibility of it. Bottle caps are bottle caps. They're easily exchanged one with another. The other thing is that it's easily transported. They're light, they're small, they stack up. You can carry a big bag of bottle caps around with you, and it doesn't weigh very much. And it's also durable. Your bottle caps are not going to wear out from banging into each other. Like the little rubber lining on the inside might go, but not the actual aluminum on the cap. So it's very durable. The only thing is, you might have to carry around a lot of bottle caps to buy something big. So that's the downside. 1,500 bottle caps would take up, quite a big bag. But, and there's plentiful enough that they're divisible enough that you can exchange one bottle cap for some bread or something, and that would work pretty well. And then because the game designers decided everybody recognizes the bottle cap as being worth money over time, that just devalues the common unit of account. Everyone thinks of the value of what they're doing in terms of caps. So the bottle cap is actually a fairly good imaginary monetary system that we get out of Fallout. So there's most of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, some of the good examples. Problem with no money, having money that's so creative with it that it really doesn't meet the specifics of what makes money good. And I keep coming back around to metalism and, just saying, hey, galactic fiat credits. It's okay to have standard monetary systems. These things evolved to meet the needs of people throughout history, so it's okay to use them. They're probably going to meet the needs of your characters. So try to be really creative with your economic systems in your books. Might be counterproductive unless you can really think about the things that I talked about and come up with something that's really unique for that time and place. Like, bottle caps, kind of an interesting idea. Could be something else. So let me know what you think about any of that down below in the comment section, and I'll see you guys next time. This is a fairly lengthy lecture. Hopefully it's been useful to you. I really do appreciate it. Newest book, if you want more writing tips, is The Keys to Prolific Creativity. This is really about designing your creative process, organizing your life so you can get work done. Newest book that I've come out with, though, is Tyrant's Gallow, but this is book 2. So get book 1, City of Silver. It's 99 cents, and then you can read this one afterwards. So thanks so much, guys, and I will see you all next time.